Tonight, a teenager sent to prison for life for killing his own family. And just as disturbing is what Nicholas Prosper didn't manage to do. His aim had been to become the most notorious school shooter of the 21st century. The police discovered after his arrest that Prosper had viewed hours and hours of extreme violence online. So is it time for a proper conversation about what we let our children watch? Also tonight, Donald Trump and President Zelensky chat on the phone, but not for nearly as long as the call with Vladimir Putin. Are we any closer to a genuine peace in Ukraine? Sarah Davies sits down with our Deputy Political Editor, Sam Coates, ahead of next week's spring statement. But is the Lib Dems message getting through? And after Kelly Badenoch dismissed Nigel Farage as a reality TV showman, Matt Hancock says, "Hold my beer." We'll remind you of the former Health Secretary's credentials as a true king of celebrity politicians. Our own stars of the small screen tonight, Jonathan Gullis and Hannah Bardel, who'll be with us for the next hour. It's Wednesday, I'm Sophy Ridge, live from Westminster, and this is the Politics Hub. Hello, good evening. Nicholas Prosper was just 19 years old when he murdered his mother, his brother and his sister. He shot his mum in the head at close range. His brother had over 100 knife wounds on his body. His sister was found under a table as if she'd been hiding there. He had intended to rape her, but his mother woke up and disturbed that plan. But Nicholas's only regret was that he hadn't killed more people. He wanted to kill children at his old primary school, 4- and 5-year-olds. Thank God that didn't happen. And so often in these cases, we talk about the murder weapon. In this case, it was a shotgun. How did the killer get it? How can we stop people getting similar weapons in the future? What laws do we need to change? But look, it's not the object doing the murdering, it's the person behind it. And of course, we don't know why people kill, but we do know that this killer, like many others, watched violent material online. This is what the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, said earlier today. She said this terrible case has exposed deep and long-standing weaknesses in private firearm sales. We're urgently looking at how we can tighten those controls, but it also shows an urgent need to look at the very disturbing way that some young people are becoming fixated with extreme violent material online and the real dangers to our communities as a result. It comes as many of us have been watching the chilling Netflix series Adolescence, which highlights the influence online content can have, particularly on young men. And at PMQs today, Keir Starmer said he would back a call for screenings of the show in Parliament and also in schools after watching the programme with his own children.
This violence carried out by young men, influenced by what they see online, is a real problem. It's abhorrent, and we have to tackle it. We are putting in specialist rape and sexual offences teams in every police force doing work on the 999 calls. But this is also a matter of culture that I think it's important that across the whole House we tackle this emerging and growing problem.
Now, we know that Carl Clifford, who was jailed recently for killing his ex-girlfriend, her sister and her mother, also watched some disturbing content online. Now, of course, lots of people would say, look, these people watch violent material because of who they are. And I'm in no way suggesting that watching things online will turn you into a killer. But still, we need to have a conversation about the content that people are viewing online. Surely that time is now. In a moment, we'll hear details of an exclusive Sky News survey on just how much extreme content teenagers are consuming. But first, our national correspondent Tom Parmenter reports on the sentencing of Nicholas Prosper.
OK, you do not have to say anything, but it may harm your defence if you do.
They didn't know it, but the officers who arrested this teenager had prevented a school massacre.
It's not murder.
Yes, we've got a male.
It's not murder, Nicholas Prosper said. But he had just shot dead 3 members of his own family. He'd practiced at home how he would kill. He'd researched and planned every detail and was on his way to his old primary school in Luton, targeting 4- and 5-year-old children.
His ambition was most definitely notoriety and to be known as being responsible for the biggest school shooting there's ever been on record.
Did you kill them?
No comments.
He refused to answer questions, but later told a prison nurse precisely what he'd intended to do. He also wrote down his plans and noted, "My effing mother messed it up." He'd planned to shoot his mum, Juliana Falcon, while she slept in the family's 8th floor flat. But she was awake and interrupted him. She saw the shotgun he had in his room. In the violent struggle that followed, he shot her dead, along with his sister Giselle, who was 13, and his brother Kyle, aged 16. A neighbour heard it all and called 999.
Hiya, yeah. Sorry, I'm a bit rattled. Upstairs, just gone up to knock on the door, sorry. And I heard a massive bang, sounded like a gunshot.
It disrupted his plan and made him leave the flats 3 hours before the school would open. In that time, he was arrested by a police patrol. The judge sentenced him to a minimum term of 49 years in prison.
You have also expressed no remorse and no sorrow. Indeed, when asked by the psychiatrist if you would try to commit another massacre, you replied, "Well, that's their job, to stop me getting the weapons if I get released." There is no suggestion that you didn't understand the law or that killing people is morally wrong. You just didn't care.
Inside court, his father was in tears. A senior police officer read a statement on his behalf.
He had completely isolated himself from us over the past year, and we had no knowledge of his intentions.
He was described here as truly evil and lacking in any remorse or empathy. It was his mother's intervention that denied him the notoriety he craved, and he'll be in his late 60s before he's eligible for parole. School safety has been reviewed across Luton. Downing Street described it as an appalling case that will prompt a review of how young people can so easily become fixated with extreme violence online. Tom Parmenter, Sky News, Luton.
When the details of that case are just so horrific, thank you for sticking with us through it. Police say that Nicholas Prosper's online history revealed a fascination with extreme violence and said it's hard to believe what he was watching is readily available on the internet. Well, a Sky News investigation has found teenagers are routinely being exposed to inappropriate material online. We surveyed teenagers in Darlington and they told us the material appears unprompted and pops up randomly. So an exclusive survey for Sky News found 55% of those Year 10 students, so age 14 and 15, had seen sexually explicit or violent content online. Half said it always or usually came up on social media apps without them searching for it, suggesting it's been driven by algorithms. And it also highlighted the scale of so-called doom scrolling, with 4 in 10 teenagers saying they spend at least 6 hours a day online. 3/4 of under-16s said they've been contacted by strangers through social media and online gaming. We can speak now to Sky's political correspondent, Tamara Cohen. Tamara, you've been speaking to young people, a very candid conversation that you've been having with them about their experiences online and the kind of content they've been seeing. What have you found?
Yeah, it makes pretty disturbing reading. So we surveyed 1,000 children across schools in Darlington, so a snapshot of that town, but it resonates more widely. And they told us what they are really seeing online. So sexually explicit content, violent content of all kinds, things they know are inappropriate. We also heard about bullying online. We heard about contacts from strangers on all different kinds of apps. Even when they put in, they say their real age, this still happens. And these are all the things that ministers and tech companies say should not be happening under the online safety laws that are being implemented this year. Now, the teenagers we spoke to who told us about all this said they wanted their voices heard, not just parents and campaigners. And when we asked them, do you want smartphones or social media banned for under 16s? They don't want that. But actually, many of them do want further restrictions to protect them from scrolling and seeing this inappropriate content, they say, just pop up when they don't actually want to see it.
You see, I think this is quite interesting when you're saying they want stricter controls. Did you get a sense from them about how they feel when they witness these kind of violent things that just pop up that they're not searching for.
Yeah, they talked about it being something that stays, these images staying with them, being disturbing. We heard about sort of eating disorder content as well, things that they don't want to see, but even when they report them, they continue to see them. Now, we sent this report to the Technology Secretary, Peter Kyle, and he sent me this comment, which is, as the testimonies from these young people show, for too long, harmful content has been easily accessible online in spaces where children should feel safe. And he said that the online safety laws which are being implemented this year are not the end of the conversation. He said, we are prepared to go further to keep our children safe. There are a lot of MPs who are very concerned about this issue.
Do you get a sense that they really are prepared to go further? Because I always, you know, they have the pressure from parents, from young people, but there is obviously also the pressure from big tech, who've got quite a loud voice in America at the minute.
That's right, and we contacted the tech companies that children are most commonly on, like Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, and they they didn't provide on the record comments on this, but they said that they all say that they take these issues very seriously. They have privacy settings to protect teenagers from being contacted by strangers. They have guides for parents to understand this all better, but the teenagers are saying that this is what they are seeing. They find it very easy to get access to this content. MPs were presented with a bill which some MPs wanted to go a lot further. They've been reluctant to ban phones in schools for under 16s or to look at really tackling these harmful algorithms, saying they want to look at what really works. But I think we're seeing other countries now starting to go further, and I think it's very much an issue that may start to move quickly.
Really interesting. Tamara, thank you very much indeed. Tamara Cohen, our political correspondent, speaking there. Well, of course, that shocking and horrific story is sure to feature in tomorrow's newspapers. We'll have our extended press preview from 10:30 this evening of tonight's news and tomorrow's headlines. Joining us will be the Daily Mirror's associate editor, Kevin Maguire, and the journalist and broadcaster, Daisy McAndrew. Right, let's bring in our duo for the evening, shall we? The former Scottish National Party MP, Hannah Bardel, and the former Conservative MP, Jonathan Gullis. Great to have you both on the programme. I feel quite shaken, to be honest, after seeing the details of that story, and it is important to differentiate that particular horrific case with the other issue that we're talking about, which is online content, which obviously I'm not saying is driving that kind of extreme violence, but it does feel like it's an increasing problem. Hannah, what's your take on this?
I mean, we have to join the dots on it, and I think all of us who were in Parliament, as Jonathan and I were, when the Online Harms Bill was being discussed and they were looking at measures, I think we all knew that it was not the answer, but it was part of the challenge, was challenging the tech firms. And when you've got situations where, if illegal football matches go up online, illegal streams of football matches, they come down like that.
Yeah.
Tech companies have got the power to do it. And and the whole thing about banning phones in schools. I'm not a great fan of banning things, actually. I think it should be about sensible measures and education. But I do think we're moving towards a situation where children are so vulnerable. And it was interesting discussion about how those children you spoke to felt about seeing that content. They're becoming desensitised. And that is absolutely leading to situations like these horrific killings. That is part of the picture. It's not about the guns that they use or the weapons that they have. It's about the thoughts, the ideology, and what they're being drawn into. And parents are not educated either, because parents, there's a huge gap, really, culturally, between those of us of my generation who were not brought up with phones, had a much more innocent childhood.
What do you think?
So, first of all, the Online Safeties Bill allows big tech firms to have large fines levied against them. The government needs to start leveraging, and I mean serious, we're talking tens, if not hundreds of millions of pounds worth of fines to send a clear message, because that hits their shareholders, that hits their investors, that will make internal pressure come about. The Labour government, I'm very angry, have not chosen to accept what Laura Trott's been pushing in Parliament from the Conservative bench about having a ban on phones in school. I say this as a former teacher, as a former pastoral head of year. The amount of issues that came from a bout of access to technology is extraordinary. A phones ban is simple. The students will hand their phones in the start of the day like they do at Michaela, and they receive them at the end of the day as they're leaving.
What kind of issues did you see when you were teaching?
Predominantly online spats, inappropriate images being shared of other students, or racial abuse at times, being sent out of school hours and parents asking me to deal with what will inevitably come into school. Now, despite this happening outside of school, of course, it ends up on our school gates, it ended up in our classrooms, and I was having to spend a lot of my time dealing with that, and it's totally inappropriate. And with phones, I'm telling you now as a father, there is not a cat in hell's chance my children will have a phone that has a camera, internet or anything else. It will have an old school Nokia that we grew up with. They can make a phone call, they can send a text that will take hours to type out. But for the age of 16, because I'm not allowing my children to be exposed and risked. And the fact these tech firms' children aren't allowed to access those tech firms' technology should tell us everything that we need to know about what's being pushed on these things. Hannah hit the nail on the head. When illegal sporting streaming goes on, within minutes it's brought down. Yet apparently this can't be done. I think it's an utterly appalling situation. The one thing I would say is the Centre for Social Justice have done this report called Lost Boys, which is a really interesting piece of work. And I think it's important that we talk about it because I do fear that masculinity is somehow demonised, and I've said it on this show before. And actually, the problem is disgusting influencers like Andrew Tate are able to then try and say, oh, look, you're not allowed to be a man. It's bad to be a man in society, but I'm here to tell you it's good. And he preys on that vulnerability and he preys on that opportunity. And we need to have a sensible conversation about how we can allow boys to feel like men, go through puberty, which is a very different experience to girls. You know, they're very different types of approaches and how you need to raise a boy as well, psychologically and physically, but making sure that we take the toxicity out of the debate, because at the moment, these disgusting influencers like Andrew Tate are able to prey on those vulnerable people.
It's also about having positive role models, you know, is that I think a lot of young men perhaps don't have that. Yes. And when we talk about masculinity, what do we mean by that? Do we mean that, you know, young men and boys shouldn't be taught the same empathy and to be brought up the same way as young girls and women are? Of course there are differences, but there is a reality to be faced that without positive role models, young men are being drawn down a road, but it starts from such a young age, and we don't want to, we don't want to believe that.
And that report from the Centre for Social Justice shows how many of those boys are growing up in single parent, particularly with just their mothers' households. And as you rightly say, those fathers may well just be absent or only checking in and out indecisively, which is unfair on those boys. Like you say, I totally agree. We need positive role models, and we need some sort of system that allows people, you know, to volunteer their time.
I think we have to be careful, though, that we don't, you know, I grew up without a father. I grew up in a single mother family. My brother grew up with just a mother and surrounded by women, and he turned out a pretty well-rounded individual. I think both male and female influences in our life are incredibly positive and important, but some people are brought up by two men and some people are brought up by two women. It's about
I don't disagree.
That broader societal impact
I agree with you on that.
Of those role models that we have.
But the data does show when you've brought in a loving household, ideally, you know, with two parents,
having love.
That predominantly leads to better life outcomes, both in health, mental health, educational outcomes as well. And that's just why it's important to have that discussion.
It's a really important debate, and I think that all of these things are such important things to be discussing. You know, it feels to me like we've spoken an awful lot in the last few years about the internet's impact on women, and actually we do also need to think about what it's doing to our young boys as well.
Totally.
And thanks both very much indeed. Now, yesterday, Donald Trump spent 2 hours talking to Vladimir Putin, only to fail to get his 30-day Ukrainian ceasefire. In fact, the one concession he did drag out of the Russian president, an agreement not to target energy infrastructure, was violated within hours. Today, he had another phone call, this time with President Zelensky, as they resumed their strained relationship, and that call didn't last quite as long. Meanwhile, another pillar of Trump's diplomatic efforts appears to be crumbling, with the Gaza ceasefire in ruins after Israel stepped up airstrikes and resumed their ground operation. So should these events be regarded as bumps on the difficult road towards lasting peace, or will questions begin to be asked about the US president's ability to get the deal done? We can talk now to our correspondent, David Blevins, who is in Washington for us. David, let's start with Ukraine. What do we know about today's call between Donald Trump and President Zelensky?
Well, Sophie, we've gone from what was a very bad day in the Oval Office nearly 3 weeks ago to what President Trump is now describing as a very good call with Volodymyr Zelensky, the Ukrainian president, having dramatically changed his tone, it would seem, thanking Donald Trump for sending javelins, one of the issues he raised during that contentious meeting in the Oval Office, but also holding out the prospect not just of that 30-day partial ceasefire, but of American investment in Ukrainian power. perhaps Volodymyr Zelensky considers that more of a security guarantee than the minerals deal we've talked so much about. But I think the most telling things today were the fact that when he asked the US president for additional air support, Donald Trump said he would see what was available in Europe. That's a very vague response. And when his press secretary, Caroline Levitt, was asked if they would continue sharing intelligence with Ukraine, she also gave a very vague response. And all of that, I think, points towards the fact that we are at a very sensitive stage in the negotiations now where Donald Trump is struggling to keep both Volodymyr Zelensky and Vladimir Putin on board. But Caroline Levitt, nonetheless, continues to believe that they're making progress. This is what she had to say a short time ago.
We have never been this close to peace, and it's only because of President Trump that we are here. I think a couple of years ago, as you all reported on the war, it was incomprehensible to have a partial ceasefire in this conflict. And today, that is true because of the leadership of this president.
So you said they agreed to closely share information between their defense staffs. Does that mean all intelligence sharing will continue? So the White House is rejecting Russia's request to pause?
Intelligence sharing in terms of defense for Ukraine will continue to be shared.
And David, it feels like we spent a lot of time, rightly of course, focusing on Ukraine, but there is also renewed military operation happening in Gaza. What is the White House's view on that?
Well, I suppose Donald Trump, it's worth remembering, is far from conventional when it comes to peacemaking. He's a businessman, not a diplomat. And while that may result in a ceasefire in Ukraine that ultimately leads to peace there, it's certainly moving in the opposite direction. In Gaza, the White House has confirmed that Israel informed the United States ahead of its renewed bombing campaign. In fact, one official says the president sanctioned it. Again, Caroline Levitt has been talking about the fact that when there are those like Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, whoever it is, Iran, even posing a threat to Israel or to the United States, then the president will strike back. In fact, today he issued another warning to Iran in relation to the Houthis having launched his own airstrikes against them at the weekend over their attacks on vessels in the Red Sea. So I think Donald Trump's approach seems to be quite straightforward in many ways. Do it my way or incur my wrath. And I think that's what we're witnessing.
David, thank you very much indeed. David Blevins there reporting from Washington. You're watching The Politics Hub. Coming up, the controversial schools bill was back in the Commons this week, and with it academy reforms that some have called madness. We'll speak to an academy founder and Conservative Party donor. That's next.
It's like a football final with only one team on the pitch. This isn't just a call to vote, but a call to remember. The freedom fought for by the African National Congress.
I'm Yusra Al-Bagher, Sky's Africa correspondent based in Johannesburg, South Africa.
A cyclone and 2 burst dams wiped out hundreds of generational homes.
This was the second dam that the floodwaters hit before it tore into Derna. We are in the heart of Nairobi, and we're watching as protesters were heavily tear gassed.
The sheer fearlessness and persistence of these guys is astonishing.
We help you understand the world with us. I remember going into the iconic Omdurman market in the heart of Sudan's capital for the first time since the war started. And this is what's left of it. Bullet holes through buildings, shelled balconies, bullet cases on the floor. I witnessed the complete destruction of a place linked to my childhood memories and the lives of millions of people. This is insane. This was a bustling residential area. So many friends who lived here. My most memorable interview was with a 15-year-old boy who'd survived being stranded on a migrant boat on its way from Senegal to the Canary Islands.
After 13 days, our food, water and fuel supply ran out.
I felt awe when we saw the mountain gorillas in Rwanda.
We call him the king of the jungle. This is the alpha silverback.
Sky News, get the full story first. Yusra Al-Bagher, Sky News.
We're rolling.
Welcome to the world.
Our new podcast, starting now. It's very exciting. Every week, we'll be reporting from the world's trouble spots.
We get to hold those in positions of power accountable, and we get to ask the questions that the audience, the listeners, want to know about.
And that's why it is so important that people tune in, come along for the road, come along for the journey. It'll be fun.
Hello, welcome back. Now, David Ross is a millionaire businessman who's the co-founder of the Carphone warehouse group and also a Conservative Party donor. And he's passionate about education. The David Ross Education Trust has founded 36 academy schools. He's worried as well about the schools bill that would force academies to follow the national curriculum for the first time. Academies would also lose their right to recruit teachers who don't have qualifications and would end the requirement for failing schools to be converted into academies with strong partner school sponsors. I caught up with him a bit earlier. Thank you very much for being on the programme. It's great to have you here. So you have how many academies now?
36 different schools now within the network.
And the first was in Grimsby, that's right?
The first was in Grimsby.
Which is where you grew up?
Yeah, in 2005, 2006, that sort of time. Under the stewardship of Lord Andrew Adonis.
And why did you go into the schools business, if you like?
I think I was seduced by misrepresentation by the same Andrew Adonis at the time. He asked me to go to Grimsby to look at a school that he was having some problems with and to come back with some advice. But when I went and visited the school, without being rude to the people that were there at the time, it was so terrible and such an awful experience compared to the experience I'd enjoyed at school. I thought, even I could do better. And that was really my driving force. It was a community that mattered to me, people that mattered to me, and I just felt that collectively we could do a better job for those children, and we have done.
And you're worried, aren't you, about the schools bill and the impact it's going to have on academies? Just explain why.
Well, there are four main priorities facing education at the moment within the school environment in which we all work, and I think pretty much anybody who's in education would agree with them, and that is behaviour, attendance, teacher recruitment and teacher retention, and special educational needs. I think there's absolute unanimity that those are four of the biggest priorities facing us. There's absolutely nothing to do with the freedom of academies and that being restrained that will have any impact on those four priorities. In addition, if you look at something like attendance, which is an issue of great concern to me, people from the DFAE came to visit one of my schools a month or so ago, looked at what we're doing on attendance. They said, this is model best practice. We're going to take this back and we're going to implement some of these processes.
What are you doing on attendance then?
Well, we do all sorts of things like early morning calls. We have a list of the regular non-attenders. With the regular non-attenders, we're putting in special supervision to get them into school. We'll send a man in a van or a man in a car or a lady in a car or a van to go and pick them up.
So it's quite, you're getting in there is what you're saying.
Yeah.
You're taking a van and picking a child up.
We will go and pick children up from their doorstep to get them to come into school. We'll ring them first thing in the morning to say, are you getting ready to come to school? We'll put in interventions in order to drive attendance. And these are the key issues that are facing our schools. The behaviour in school, the attendance in school, recruiting and keeping great teachers, and the terrible tragedy of special educational needs and how we address that. These are the core issues that we should be addressing. We shouldn't be worrying about restricting academy freedoms, because actually it's those freedoms that enable us to do the innovative, different things that can become best practice. And that's something that should be celebrated, not restrained.
I guess what Labour would say, what the government would say, is not all academies are successful like yours, right? 50% of children now go to an academy, so there are some pretty bad ones as well as the really excellent ones as well. And so doesn't every child want their kid to be taught by a qualified teacher, to be following a rigorous curriculum? Yes, if you have a great academy, that might be fine, but if you have a poor academy, don't you need those controls?
If you have a poor academy, what you should be doing is putting it into a great trust. And you should be, there is no doubt that under the previous government, the academies programme was not quite finished off. And the bit that needs to be finished off is that standalone single academy trusts that are not performing, or small academy trusts that are not performing, should be encouraged to go and to share best practice or to join best practice. In terms of should everybody have a rigorous curriculum, absolutely. Every child should be entitled to a great education. You know, I believe that. That's why I've spent the last 20 years of my life dedicating a huge amount of time and energy to that programme. Yes, of course they should, but restricting the freedom that we have to operate is not a way of making it better. And if I give you a case in point, at the school we have in London, we have London Academy of Excellence, Phil Harris and ourselves all next to each other, next to the Olympic Park. That is the best possible way of making sure that all the children in that area get a great education, because parents can select from any one of those providers, and they know that those are 3 different academy trusts that bring a different approach and a different style of education, each of it rigorous, but each of it different. And that's what parents should be entitled to enjoy for their children.
Now, you're a supporter of the Conservative Party. You backed David Cameron, you backed Boris Johnson. Am I right in thinking you donated to both the Robert Jenrick and the Kemi Badenoch campaigns?
I would have to check that, but I could have done, yes.
What are you doing there? Are you hedging your bets? What's going on?
No. I at the start of the leadership campaign, if I'm very honest, I didn't know Kemi personally that well. I didn't know Robert personally that well. I'd never worked with either of them in any real capacity previously because of their briefs previously. I just wanted to make sure that there was the best competition possible to get the best leader, and therefore, when the two of them got into the final run-up, I supported both of them, because I thought and believe that the most important thing is that we had a good and proper debate between the pair of them.
How do you think Kemi Badenoch's doing?
I think she's doing a great job, and I think time will tell that she will be a great leader for the Tory party.
There's a lot of speculation about Reform trying to kind of pick off some of the, big money donors from the Conservative Party. They've been trying to court you at all, or are you too much?
I'm very lucky. I think I know 80% of the Reform MPs. I was at school with 20% of them, and I'm a close personal friend of another 20% of them. I know Reform very well, but I don't think there's...
So 20, that means you were at school with one of them, right?
Sorry, your maths is very good.
I
but I think they know me well enough to know that I am a committed Tory. I'm not convinced that Reform are the answer to all of our problems.
And why is that?
Well, I'll give you a case in point. In much of the work that I do around education, I've been trying to work out what their education policy is. Education is an absolute key element of what government should provide for the benefit of society and the benefit of young people in our communities. I've been unable to identify what their education policy is, and I'm not sure I really understand what their health policy is. Really, we need a government that understands education, understands health, and understands these other priorities. And that is not at the moment the Reform Party.
You obviously were quite close to Boris Johnson. Some in the Conservative Party is still holding a torch for him to kind of come back, knight in shining armour. Would you like to see Boris Johnson return to the political front line?
I'm a 100% fully paid up Kemi supporter.
There you go. I love it. That is coming through, definitely. And just finally, you are also a businessman as well as the 100% paid up Kemi supporter. What would you like to see in the spring statement?
Well, what I would like to see generally is a low regulation, low tax economy which encourages people to come here. If I look at some of the businesses that I'm involved with at the moment, they have an office in London or an office in the UK and an office in Germany, office in Poland, office in Holland. The employment opportunities at the moment are not coming to the UK because people are choosing to employ back office and choosing to employ other senior managerial roles out of European countries, not out of the UK.
And why is that?
Because I just think that people need to feel that Britain is open for business and that this is an environment that encourages employment, encourages entrepreneurship, encourages the taking of risk. And I'm not sure that the messages that we're giving out at the moment are fulfilling giving that message. I think, if you look at the Employment Rights Bill, of course people should be protected in the workplace, but they should also have an adequate period of probation. Great employers, and many of the businesses I'm involved with, have always pertained to be great employers. We want to recruit great people, we want to train great people, we want to retain great people. That's what we do in our schools, that's what we do throughout the businesses that I'm involved with. Great employers want to be great businesses want to be great employers. This Employment Rights Bill is just going to curtail employment alongside the national insurance. It's not going to encourage it.
So do you think jobs will be lost as a result then? Is that what you're saying?
I think that we're in a global marketplace. And if you can employ somebody in a different country on a different regime to the one here, that's what you're able to do now. You know, I'm involved with a business that employs people in Spain who attend virtually. They don't come to the office because technology enables us to work in a European and global basis. So it's a very competitive market. We want to be the most competitive, most job-friendly country in the world. That involves encouraging employers to do the right thing because they benefit from doing the right thing, not tying them up in knots and getting them into tribunals the whole time.
Thank you very much.
It's an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much.
My interview there with David Ross. Coming up next on the Politics Hub. So Ed Davey sits down with Sam Coates and tells him why, rather than attacking the government over controversial welfare cuts, he's calling for an emergency budget. Hello, welcome back. Now, you might have expected the controversial changes to welfare to have dominated today's PMQs, but both Kemi Badenoch and Ed Davey decided to focus on the economy instead. Fresh from the chamber, Sir Ed Davey was talking to Sky's deputy political editor, Sam Coates. Sam, how did you find him?
I mean, look, let me just tell you the background of the interview. Ed David's obvious reach out and say he's doing a big round of interviews with broadcasters today. And, you know, we know every day it's really hard to reach the public, to cut through with a message, say something distinctive. So here was a moment, a platform. You don't get them that often. And so I went along this afternoon. And look, we're about to play a bit of this interview. And as viewers watch it, I want you to judge whether or not you think that there was a clear message. We were talking about whether or not the welfare changes were the right ones. And have a listen, but he basically goes, well, some are and some aren't. He says that there should be an emergency budget. I'm like, is it really an emergency? And he sort of says, well, it was worse during the Liz Truss era. And he actually sort of says that the government may actually be walking quite a fine tightrope over Donald Trump, doesn't really go out of his way to criticise it. To the question is, what message was he trying to land? As you listen to this, ask the question, is how Ed Davey addresses the questions effective and memorable? Let's hear the interview. Ed Davey, you're calling for an emergency budget today. What emergency is this? I don't hear lots of people talking about an emergency.
Well, people in business are really worried about the economy. The economy is flatlining. In fact, it fell back last month. And I don't see the government taking the sort of measures needed to reboot. They're going ahead with the job tax, which we've criticised since the budget. They're not going fast with removing the barriers to trade and getting a good, decent trade deal with our European colleagues, even though we're getting the tariffs from President Trump. So I absolutely think we need an emergency growth budget.
It's not like Black Wednesday. It's not like where we were after Liz Truss's mini-budget. We're in an environment where there are things the government has done that you disagree with, but it's politics as normal. It's irresponsible to say there's an emergency situation that requires an emergency budget, isn't it?
No, I disagree with you. You're right to say that it's not as bad as it was under the Conservatives with the Liz Truss budget. I would agree with that. There was an absolute disaster from the Conservatives. They completely wrecked the economy. But this government came in saying it wanted to grow the economy, and the economy is not growing. It's creating a real problem for the public finances, and we're seeing the implications of that.
What would you do differently on the welfare package to what the government put forward yesterday?
I'm really worried they're going to hit people who are genuinely disabled and can't work, and we would oppose that. There are parts of it that I think we could support. For example, they've got this idea of a right to choose, where you would be able to, and a right to try, I think they call it, where you'd be able to go into a job without losing your disability benefits to see whether that job works for you.
I just want to switch subjects for a moment. When you look at the direction of travel over the last few months, you look at the way that this government is interacting with Donald Trump. When you look at the switch from aid funding to defence spending, when you look at some of the language around welfare, and some of that has been controversial, do you think that social liberalism is in retreat? Do you think your kind of politics is actually in abeyance at the moment?
Well, I've been very disappointed by some of those moves that you outline. Let's take Donald Trump, for example. It does seem to me that it's quite bizarre that we're the only party in British politics calling Donald Trump out. I have a little bit of sympathy with the government, let me be very frank with you. They're trying to tread a very fine line in order to try to persuade Trump to change his views, but I've come to the conclusion that he's an unreliable ally, and I'm very disappointed that the Conservatives and the Reform are not calling Trump out. He should be called out.
So the takeaway for me was that Ed Davey thinks there should be an emergency budget, but we're in not as much of an emergency as we were in the immediate aftermath of the Liz Truss mini-budget, from which I conclude that we're in an almost permanent sense of emergency if we're in the Lib Dems.
I think you have a particularly pointed analysis of that interview, and we're very balanced on Politics Hub, so it's on me to obviously put the other side. Maybe it's just your questions, Sam.
I mean, it might be. I think I probably did let you down and let the viewers down, but I stared. And by the way, Sophie, that interview was 10 minutes long. We've only given you 3 minutes. So, in fact, as a treat, we'll put up on social media the whole version so everybody can watch. And there'll be a quiz tomorrow to check that you did. But I stared and I stared at the transcript to work out what the top line was of that. And these moments really matter in this crowded communication marketplace. Viewers can decide whether or not that landed a punch.
Just while we have you, Sam, as well, there was a bit of a first today when it comes to PMQs. Just explain what happened. You delivered some watch-along analysis.
Oh, okay.
Remember that?
Oh, sorry. Oh, the first was us. Not what was in PMQ.
I love your alarm. this is me teeing up for a nice, friendly question to promote your own stuff, and you were like...
I think it's unprofessionalism all the way through. Look, what happened today is we launched a new innovation on the Sky News website where you can watch PMQs, but you can have me talking throughout, analysing as it goes along, like a little kind of gaming video that my kids would watch with a sort of commentary as you go along. Hopefully we'll do it again. You get instant analysis, a few bits of shade along the way, and hopefully we explain what's going on as it goes along.
Just a few bits of shade, very restrained. Sam Coates there, our Deputy Political Editor. And as you would expect, we will bring you the spring statement in full here on Sky News next Wednesday. I'll be with you from 11 a.m. on the day for complete coverage, reaction and analysis. Right, let's bring in our duo for the evening, shall we? Jonathan and Hannah. I mean, brutal, can I just say? Brutal.
I wouldn't want to be on the other side of Sam Coates, not having an answer to a question.
Sam is consistent, which is always a good thing. His disdain for all politicians and all political parties is equal in measure. What I would say is now he's doing this live feed, or live streaming of PMQs with his commentary over the top of your questions. I would be pretty nervous about the type of question I answer, knowing that he will probably make a very sarcastic comment if you don't make it something that he would be interested in. So, yeah, good luck to future MPs on that one.
And look, the serious point here, because I feel like we should have a bit of a serious conversation, is about the kind of spring statement. Ed Davey there calling for, an emergency budget. What do you think, Hannah?
I mean, I think what he should be calling for is a reversal of the proposals that Labour are coming forward with, which is basically austerity 2.0. I mean, going where I think even the Conservatives wouldn't have gone, cuts to disability budgets. There's no doubt that they inherited a bit of an economic mess, but to balance it on the backs of some of the poorest and most vulnerable in society, it feels like what happened after the banking crisis. There was all this talk about we're in a terrible financial state, and we were, but the banks were bailed out. Many of them kept their jobs, and it was society that suffered as a result of austerity. And I don't hear anything around some of those great employment programmes that we had back in the day, like Remploy, that supported and encouraged people with disabilities into employment, and also using the rhetoric of people are on the scrap heap and somehow cutting their benefits is going to help them. Like, when you talk about personal independence payment and PIP, I mean, that benefit literally helps people with adjustments often in the workplace, and 40% of folk who are on benefits are actually working. So I think for a lot of people out there, they're thinking, why are we not taxing billionaires? The average income of billionaires went up by, I think it's 35 million a day, according to Oxfam. Why are we not just putting... I saw Nadia Whittam, the Labour MP, do an excellent interview the other day saying, if we tax just 2% more on assets over £10 million, we could have another, I think it was £24 billion into the budget. So, I mean, why are we not doing those things?
What's your take? I imagine you come from a slightly different perspective on that.
Look, my take is this. What has been announced with the welfare reform is essentially to bail out Rachel Reeves in order to create the headroom that she's now desperately trying to recover, to claim that her fiscal rules haven't been broken. The reality is stark for everyone to see. The economy has not grown at all. We saw actually that recent figure saying that there was a 0.1% decline in the economy, particularly in construction. There's doubt that they'll even be able to hit this 1.5 million homes target. We're seeing job losses at a rate of knots. In Stoke-on-Trent, we've seen 2 now potteries firms go out of business entirely, others making major scale redundancies, partly due to energy prices, partly due to the rising cost of employment, and particularly 18 to 23-year-olds being hit in this sector in hospitality, retail and leisure by both equalising the minimum wage for that age group and obviously putting up employers' national insurance contribution. The figures are there for everyone to see, and I think ultimately this is about trying to save Rachel Reeves, and I think that Labour are in a heap of trouble. The Resolution Foundation, which I find very interesting because Torsten Bell, now a Labour minister, was out on the airwaves last night on other shows defending the welfare cuts.
You can say Newsnight's all right. There
we go. I'll say on Newsnight, and it's been heavily criticised for what was a very unempathetic interview. He was the former head of that Resolution Foundation who tonight put out that lowest income families are going to be hit hardest by his welfare reforms. It's amazing that if the shoe was on the other foot a year ago, he wouldn't be celebrating what's coming out, he'd be condemning it.
I guess, just because I think it is important for me to put the government's perspective here, because I'm very aware we've got 2, kind of opposition politicians, if you like. On the growth thing in particular, I think what they would say is that a lot of the things that they're doing now are long-term projects, right? So on things like planning, for example, these are reforms that lots of people welcome. On house building, like you say, the ambitious targets, they're trying to do things that might not show up in next month's growth figures, but these are for the decisions for the long term, right?
Yeah, but if you're a disabled person or somebody who's got a chronic illness or a lifelong illness, you're going to be dead before the time that those benefits come into action. That's
Is there an argument, though, that the benefits bill has been increasing, particularly on sickness benefit, and that we are an outlier in terms of the number of people who are claiming it?
I think the statistics speak for themselves when they say, yeah, one of the major increases in the benefits bill is people's mental health. But surely, to tackle that, cutting people's benefits is not the answer. It's increasing support for people with mental health issues and supporting people into the right kind of employment at the same time as making sure that they have enough money to live on and to eat. And we've seen the rise in food banks, we've seen the rise in the use of food banks and the extreme levels of poverty in the UK. We're supposed to be a developed family of nations.
Yeah. To back up your view, and I will say this, Labour have taken brave and bold decisions on big infrastructure projects, such as the third runway at Heathrow, and they have my full respect for being brave and bold enough to do things the Conservatives, frankly, should have been doing. Angela Rayner is the only one I can see in government going for growth. Okay. Calling in all these planning applications and approving them is exactly what needed to be done. Again, should have been going on under a Conservative government. So I think Angela Rayner's read the memo. It's a shame the rest of the front bench, haven't got that understanding either.
Yeah, I'm still getting used to opposition, I see. Thanks both very much indeed. Still to come on the Politics Hub. As Kelly Badenoch dismisses Nigel Farage as a reality TV star and says politics is not show business, it got us thinking about the man who bestrode those two worlds like a mighty colossus. It could only be Matt Hancock.
The only way to Gaza for us right now is with the Israeli military. The IDF had brought us in to show us a tunnel network under a residential neighbourhood.
The length of time it must have to have created these tunnels must have taken years.
At the end of the day, it's war at the top. It's war down here.
I'm Alistair Bunkle, Sky's Middle East correspondent based here in Jerusalem. As we were filming, there was a gun battle in the next street.
This neighbourhood, the Israeli military say, was the stronghold of Hamas's Rafah brigade.
It was just after 6:30 a.m. when the first shots were fired.
I remember everything. It was a day that I don't think I'll ever be able to forget.
There's no moon, perfect conditions for smugglers and human traffickers trying to move fuel, weapons and people.
The valleys in between, they're some of the main smuggling routes.
After days of negotiation, a major smuggler here has agreed to meet us.
The families that we've spoken to of people who have died trying to cross into Europe, they say you're a murderer. Are you a murderer?
No.
Sky News, get the full story first. Begum was 15 when she left East London with 2 school friends to join Islamic State in Syria.
Do you feel that you have committed a crime to the extent that you should serve time in a British prison?
I mean, I feel like the only crime I committed was coming here.
If you can't take the heat, get out of the kitchen. I can take the heat. The second thing that Harry Truman said, was in politics, if you want a friend, get a dog.
My children will love a dog.
In Tel Aviv, a constant streak of interceptions filled the night sky as waves of missiles came in.
It appears to be a very, very large and sustained attack on Israel.
Play Sky News.
From the Sky News Centre at 7.
Now that you're up to date, we can go into a bit more detail.
Things can change incredibly quickly.
Taken by surprise.
Have you ever known a moment like this in British politics before?
Yes.
Cheers. We'll start with breaking news.
Let's get the latest on the ground.
So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better.
Hello, welcome back to the Politics Hub. Now, Kelly Badenoch has given an interview where she dismisses Nigel Farage as a reality TV star, saying politics is not show business and government is not an episode of I'm a Celebrity. Well, no, of course not. One is a group of individuals undergoing bizarre and humiliating challenges in a jungle full of poisonous snakes, competing for the popular vote. And the other is, well, you get the idea. By sheer chance, just as Kemi was slagging off Nigel for being a reality TV star, the true OG of reality TV was appearing at the COVID inquiry.
Can I bring you back to my question, please?
I answered it, yeah.
I don't believe you did. The question was, does your message contain a typographical error?
I've no idea. I can't remember sending the message. I will have been sending hundreds at the same time.
Did you take Mr. Bourne's offer forward or not?
I've absolutely no idea. You can see the paperwork if you've read it.
Well, it got us thinking about Matt Hancock's best or maybe worst moments as a reality TV star.
Today I'm announcing that I won't be standing for Parliament as a Conservative at the next election.
So I'm going to choose my favourite chocolate bar.
I pushed myself in the past, but I want to test the limits.
Let's bring in Jonathan and Hannah again, shall we? It's almost like a dream, like when he was on I'm a Celebrity and all of that.
It's a nightmare, but...
Have either of you ever been tempted? I can imagine you and I'm a Celebrity, Jonathan.
I've been told very clearly by my good wife that she is not to see me at any stage do any reality TV whatsoever, because I'd probably further embarrass her if I did so. So no, I'm not tempted. I have a real disdain for the idea that politicians want to try and become celebrities. I have no problem with them wanting to be commentators on social issues or the news agenda of the day, but I just... Especially when Matt did what he did, which was during his time as a serving MP. If some people do it outside of Parliament, I could understand it a bit more, but to do it while serving as a Member of Parliament is wholly inappropriate and completely undermines trust in politics. So I feel that, and I don't know if Matt really helped save his brand at all, to be honest with you. I suspect that's maybe something he can decide.
I think there's different levels. I mean, maybe Strictly or something like that that's got a bit more credence to it and it's more physical. But I mean, I feel like I'm a Celebrity is just... Although, I have to say, Kezia Dugdale did a very good job of going on it, keeping her credibility, now has a phenomenal career in academia. So I actually think a lot of it is about the individual. I agree with Jonathan to some extent, that, and certainly when you're a serving politician, to be seen to be going off and disappearing and not being there for your constituents is just not on. It's massively problematic. But, you know, equally, there's life after politics and, you know, Ed Balls did a pretty good job of being neutralised by his experience on Strictly. He's now a TV presenter. And, you know, what people don't really understand sometimes is that politicians have a lot of different skills. Some have a lot of different skills
What would you go on then? If there was any reality show or TV show
I
you'd
loved The Jump. Now, I appreciate it was very dangerous and it got cancelled because people got injured on it. It was when they did
the skiing
It was a
one.
snow sports one.
Yeah, so are you a bit of a snowboarder? You fancy yourself, do you?
Yeah, I'm a bit of a snowboarder, so I would do a sports-based one. Or
I'd probably do, is it the SAS one, which Matt actually did do, because I've always dreamed of a career in the military and I feel it's the only way I might finally start getting fit again. So that would be quite interesting. But a regular panellist on the show, Sophie, James Starkey, a good friend of mine, he absolutely is desperate to get in the jungle. So I hope,
there you go.
I hope the producers are listening and they sign him up.
There you go, we're out of time.